This episode is sponsored by all the generous people that are on the Patreon feed for the Life Shift podcast. Thank you so much for supporting the production of the show. As you may or may not know, I do everything myself so far. And so this contribution to the production costs and software costs and hardware costs and all those things are so helpful. So thank you so much for your support. If you are interested in directly supporting the Life Shift podcast, you can head to patreon.com/the Life Shift podcast. And there you can learn more about how to support the show. So thank you so much. And here is this week's episode.
I always looked at what I lacked instead of what I had until I had a moment when I went to get my first seeing eye dog that completely changed my outlook on life. Now, I went there to learn how to use a guide dog, but I learned a whole lot more than just how to use a guide dog. You see, when I was there, I met some people there who were also getting a guide dog. And some of these people, they had mental impairments on top of being blind. So multiple disabilities. Some people were on dialysis every single week because they had diabetes that had stolen their eyesight. And then there were these girls there whom I'll never forget, these young girls who could neither see nor hear. They were deaf and blind, yet they were getting a guide dog because they wanted to have more independence in their lives. And so that experience just blew instantly any of the self-pity that I had right out of me, because I realized at that moment, here I am, I'm 23 years old. I've had all of my hearing, all my mental and kidney function, and about 20 something years of usable eyesight. And so that was like this epiphany that just shifted the way that I looked at everything. I realized at that moment that for me, happiness is not a feeling and it's not an emotion. It's a decision that you make every single day when you wake up. You either choose how you're going to look at things or you just allow random circumstances to affect your happiness.
Today's guest is Chad Foster. Chad is an extraordinary individual who turned his blindness into a powerful catalyst for success and resilience. He was diagnosed with a genetic eye condition at a pretty young age, but he knew he would eventually lose his sight. Despite this daunting prospect of the future, he chose to focus on what he could control, and he developed this resilient mindset that really has propelled him to incredible heights, literally. In this episode, Chad shares his journey from losing his sight in college to becoming a trailblazer in the business world. He discusses the anatomy of resilience that he's developed, the importance of turning obstacles into opportunities, and the significance of authentic leadership. Chad's story shows us that our greatest challenges can become our most powerful motivators. I won't tell you too much more, but I'm certain you'll learn a lot from Chad. So, without further ado, here is my conversation with Chad Foster. I'm Matt Gilhooly, and this is The Life Shift. Candid conversations about the pivotal moments that have changed lives forever. Hello, my friends. Welcome to the Life Shift podcast. I am here with Chad. Hello, Chad.
How's it going? Thanks for having me here today.
Well, thank you for being a part of this. We were talking a little bit before recording, and I was just telling you a little bit about how the Life Shift podcast really started, if you will. And just for anyone listening that's brand new, when I was 8, my mom was killed in a motorcycle accident, and my parents were divorced, and they lived states apart. And at that moment in time, my life completely shifted from what it was going to be to a brand new what it was going to be. And I didn't understand that. And it was the late 80s, early 90s, and people around me they just didn't know how to help a grieving child. And so I really pushed that down for about 20 years. And all that time, I really thought, do other people have these significant pivotal moments in their lives that changed everything, or they became like a different person because of those moments? And it turns out, after having all these conversations, they do, and they have many of them. And Chad, you also have many of them, I am sure. We just talked through a couple of them before we started recording. So,
Yeah.
Thank you for just wanting to be a part of this journey, because it is such a healing journey for myself, but I also know for the listeners as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, I've certainly had my share of life shift moments, one of which I can think of recently when I was attending business school. So the short version, and we'll get to more of this later on in the show, but I went blind at 21 years old due to an inherited eye condition. And I ended up coming out of that experience better off than before, happier and more successful. And, here I am in my 30s at the time, late 30s, early 40s, and I'm at Harvard Business School. I brought in all this revenue for my company, and they asked what they could do for me. And for some crazy reason, I asked them to send me to Harvard. And for some crazier reason, they agreed to write a six-figure check and do that. And so, a lot of people think you go to Harvard to learn about case studies and business metrics and all these things. And that's certainly part of it. But the thing that really stood out for me is I'm taking this class called Authentic Leadership under the guidance and teaching of Bill George. And Bill George is an executive fellow there, used to be the chairman, CEO of Medtronic, one of the world's largest medical supply companies. And he teaches how to help people find their true north. And we're studying his True North leadership framework and reading the book. And a lot of my classmates are wondering what their true north could be. When mine just sort of reached up and smacked me in the face there in his class, I realized that my whole life, people had told me that what I was doing was inspiring. The fact that I was showing up and doing the work, not being able to see, and doing things like writing software to be able to use my computer more effectively, or getting a guide dog to traverse where I was going, various countries around the world, or just all the different challenges that I had and how I faced those. They always told me that that was inspiring. I wasn't really trying to inspire anybody. I was just trying to get to my next goal. But I realized in that moment that I could be doing more with what I'd gone through. And that really crystallized for me in particular when my classmates elected me to be our graduating speaker. And I had this feeling that it was going to happen. I don't know how to describe it. I just know that I felt it in this unmistakable way. It was like a gravitational pull that I'm going to be the graduating speaker in my class at Harvard. And being a type A person, I'm like, I can't be caught flat footed for that. That would be a bad look. And so I flew to Houston, much to the uncertainty of my wife, spent several $1,000s. I met with a professional speaker, wrote a 12-minute talk for a graduation ceremony for which I had not even been nominated or
Oh, you
elected
did this before.
before.
Nice.
Yeah, because I wanted to be prepared. And so, of course, as fate would have it, and as destiny would have it, I was elected, and I was obviously prepared, and it affected people that evening in a way that I never really anticipated. It affected me in a way that I never anticipated. There was a couple of people, a lot of people came up to me, but a few really stood out afterwards. One gentleman was going through a messy divorce, and he had shared with me that something I said helped him. And then there was another gentleman there I'll never forget. He's literally, he's weeping in my arms because something I'd said helped him. And I later found out that this particular classmate had lost his daughter the year before to cancer. And something I'd said helped him. Now, I've never really been this warm and fuzzy person, but when you have a parent, you know, with that kind of loss, going through that kind of loss, and something you said somehow helped them, it changes you. And it changed me. It showed me how in moments like that, helping people with my experiences that I've been through can make going blind worth it in some bizarre sort of way. And so now I realize that for me, blindness could be the beautiful gift that came disguised in really ugly wrapping paper. And so I've since that moment, my true north I've discovered is helping people with the lessons of resilience that I've learned. The anatomy of resilience is now what I talk about. And so since that evening, that was sort of my tipping point moment. It ignited a fire inside of me. I've built a professional speaking business. My first book was released since then. And, I've really made a living, a profession out of doing meaningful work. And it's, when you find something that connects with you on that emotional level, something that gives new value to the experiences that you've had, it's not even work. It's not a job. It's not transactional. It's a reason for being. It's a mission. It's a purpose that gives you this endless reservoir of energy and perseverance and determination to do the hard work that we all need to do when we're building a successful business.
Were you someone before? I mean, you highlighted a bunch of what we could call pivotal moments in your life just in that short story. But before this, like speaking moment where you realized just by telling your story and what you did would touch other people. Were you someone that was kind of in touch with your feelings and would
Never.
connect with people in that? Okay, so
No.
this was like a true
No.
unwrapping, if you will, of
Well,
that wrapping paper.
it was, but I'll say, I didn't get into the heart side of it. I didn't, and I that never really has been my strong suit. If I'm being transparent with you, like
We won't
going,
paint that picture then.
yeah, going blind, and I grew up in a sort of a tough love household. My dad was very old school. He was trying to prepare me for the inevitability of going blind, and so he used some tough love, and it was hard to swallow at the time. It definitely helped, but it was difficult. And the challenges that I faced learning the limitations of my eyesight were also difficult. Not being able to see in poor lighting conditions, bumping into things, going to the hospital so much that they would question my parents and I in separate rooms as to whether or not they were abusing me, not being able to drive a car at night because my eyesight had begun to fade, not being able to do many things that a lot of my peers were able to do. I played sports and drove a car, but I couldn't drive at night. It's just all these sort of awkward things that were really challenging and inconvenient sort of hardened me to how difficult life could be. It reinforced I have this natural tendency to have this harder edge, but obviously, you go blind in your late teens, early 20s. If you don't toughen up, it's not an easy task. And so I had sort of turned that off. I had turned all that off, just created this sort of steely exterior to push through and do the hard work that I needed to do to get to where I am. Ironically, in my 40s, again, another kind of life shift moment for me. I wanted to get certified as a leadership coach because I realized that I had this opportunity to help a lot of people. I didn't have the tools to do it. Very, very comfortable on stage now in front of thousands of people. Very comfortable leading a 60, 90-minute keynote and or workshop, hybrid, whatever. Very comfortable in a podcast, but having the tools to meet people where they are on their journey, I didn't have. And so I got certified to be an integral coach with New Ventures West on the West Coast in San Francisco. And the irony there is, in order to coach other people, you have to do your own internal work. And that was really, really transformational for me to see all the ways of being that I hadn't put down. We adopt these ways of being in our life to get us through hard moments for very good reasons. I had adopted this harder exterior shell to protect me mentally, emotionally, psychologically from all the things I was going through. But I never really stopped to question whether or not that was serving me anymore until I went through this certification at New Ventures West. And really, it was a beautiful softening that took place. It gave me a lot of versatility and awareness and ability to connect with myself and as a byproduct with others on a much deeper and more intimate level, and being comfortable showing a lot of that vulnerability that I really hadn't had before. But certainly, the sharing that was sort of when the dam broke. But the first time I gave that talk at business school, that was the first glimpse. And then I got into, all right, let me expand my keynote, and then all right, let me write the book. And I got published with HarperCollins. And the whole process of doing that was, the more vulnerability you can create in the book, the more connection you'll create with the reader. And it was just me just continually, incrementally getting out of my comfort zone with sharing and being vulnerable. And it was incredibly uncomfortable at first. And it still kind of is, but that's where growth happens, is when we're uncomfortable.
Yeah, well, I agree with that, and it's almost like you see this in little stages or the layers in which you say you crack it open, and then the performative. There is an element of performative nature when you are speaking. I think that can kind of help us separate a little bit of it
Yeah.
because we still have a task to accomplish, if
Oh,
you
yeah.
will.
Oh, yeah.
And then having that face to face or being like a leadership coach, I can imagine becomes a lot scarier. Not scary, but a lot more vulnerable, I guess, if you're face to face with someone and have to kind of like meet them where they are and maybe admit, oh, that's happened to me as well. And so I can relate and I can empathize
Yeah.
and connect with you. I mean, I
Stuff
think
gets
it's a
very real. It gets very real in those sessions. On stage,
super valuable though.
yeah, it is. It is. On stage, I think on stage for me, I've sort of mastered the craft to understand, here's my message and here's how I'm customizing it, and here are the challenges. talking to 1,000 people one way versus a two-way conversation about people's most difficult moments. Hey, man, that takes a ton of, I would say, even more alertness, awareness, being in the moment, attentiveness to what the other person is going through, really being switched on, not taking a second off, and listening with all of your heart, your mind, your body, like paying attention to everything takes a lot of focus and a lot of alertness.
Yeah, a totally different part of your brain and heart than speaking, I would
It
imagine
is.
as well. Like, yeah,
Yeah.
you got to tap into something totally different. I was thinking about your journey towards losing your sight. And so it sounds like you knew this was coming, or it was kind of inevitable because it was genetic. Is that
Yeah.
true?
Yeah, that's right. It was sort of the hidden family eye disease. So we knew I had it, but nobody else in my family had it. And so they diagnosed me at roughly 3 years old
Oh, wow.
and told me that at some point I could go blind, but my parents didn't have it. Obviously, they were carriers for it, but because it was autosomal recessive, nobody else in the family was symptomatic for it. My brother didn't have it. I was the only one who had symptoms from it. So I knew it was coming. But when you're a kid and they tell you that it's coming, it's sort of this abstract concept way off in the future that may or may not happen. You don't prepare for it.
And even when it's happening, do you like you were describing yourself as like it was, it was obviously distracting and these were hard parts of your life, but you hardened yourself and you kept going. Where I could see a lot of people, maybe even myself, facing something like that, I might go the opposite way and turn like what gave you the confidence to keep running, or were you always just kind of like that? Like you were just going to keep tackling things no matter what came at you?
It's a really good question. I don't know. I think certainly some of it, I think some of it is inherent. My parents used to always say I was really, really hard-headed until I became successful, and then they started calling me determined, which I think is just better marketing, right? It's sort of the same concept, but
It's more complimentary, I guess.
yeah, exactly. Same exact thing, just better marketing team behind it. I think that's part of it, but I think, I had a lot of positive influences. I had people who gave me the straight talk when I needed to hear it. I was fortunate enough to be exposed to people and situations that gave me the gratitude that became the foundation for my perspective shift in my life, which allowed me to discover what I now think of as the anatomy of resilience and what allowed me to succeed. And so when I talk, when I'm delivering a keynote, I break down the anatomy of resilience. I have 5 pillars for it, but it's all based on what I've experienced in my life. These aren't things that I've read in a book. They're just my lived human experience. And so I tell the stories around them, but really what I do through my keynote speaking is it's the unpacking of what I have done over the last 20 years of my life. How did I get from where I was to where I'm at? Because let me tell you, I was in a pretty bad space, a pretty dark space, no pun intended, going blind in college, 21 years old. We ask kids all the time, what do you want to be when you grow up? Well, guess what? None of them say they want to be a blind person. So it was a pretty tough spot. I had to flush about 3 years of university work. I wanted to go into the medical field, but because I really wanted to help other people. But at that point, after going blind, I honestly wasn't even sure if I could help myself. So
Right.
I had
So
to,
you did have moments of doubt. It wasn't always like, I can do anything in
oh
the
no,
world.
no, there were
Okay.
definitely moments of doubt. There were definitely moments of despair. The victim mentality set in, front and center for a while. And I would say I experienced that even before I went totally blind. As I was losing my eyesight, I always looked at what I lacked instead of what I had until I had a moment when I went to get my first seeing eye dog that completely changed my outlook on life. Now, I went there to learn how to use a guide dog, but I learned a whole lot more than just how to use a guide dog. You see, when I was there, I met some people there who were also getting a guide dog, and some of these people, they had mental impairments on top of being blind. So multiple disabilities. Some people were on dialysis every single week because they had diabetes that had stolen their eyesight. And then there were these girls there whom I'll never forget, these young girls who could neither see nor hear. They were deaf and blind. Yet they were getting a guide dog because they wanted to have more independence in their lives. And so that experience just blew instantly any of the self-pity that I had right out of me, because I realized at that moment, here I am, I'm 23 years old. I've had all of my hearing, all my mental and kidney function, and about 20 something years of usable eyesight. And so that was like this epiphany that just shifted the way that I looked at everything. I realized at that moment that for me, happiness is not a feeling and it's not an emotion. It's a decision that you make every single day when you wake up. You either choose how you're going to look at things, or you just allow random circumstances to affect your happiness. And so that really, to me, underscored the power of choice in how we see things, our perspective, but also the anchor for things, our happiness really doesn't lead to gratitude. It's our gratitude that leads to happiness. And it was the lesson that I learned from these brave souls there who taught me that, because here they were facing what I would consider to be far more difficult circumstances, and doing so with such living courage that it left me ashamed of my pathetic approach and my pathetic attitude towards life. And so when I left there with my new seeing eye dog, everything changed. My attitude changed. Doors started opening for me. Grades improved. Professors helped out. Got a great job. Got on the corporate ladder. Like climbed the corporate ladder. Everything fell into place. But everything started with that moment of recognition about how gratitude is so crucial to affecting our perspective, which highlights, ironically, the first pillar that I talk about, which is the power of choice. You have to choose your response.
Yeah, that perspective element is very powerful, and it can be. I would also, like, as you're telling this story, I'm curious how did society feel like was it creating roadblocks for you because people weren't set up to help you be successful if you needed it? Or did you feel like it was everyone was willing to help, and you just had to make it happen because your perspective has changed?
No, there were still plenty of roadblocks. So, as an example, I couldn't even get at the time I was at the University of Tennessee, and I was in the pre-med field. I switched to business, and I couldn't get my books in a format that I could consume. So literally my mom stepped in and read every single college business book to audio cassette for me, because there was no other way for me to get it. And so you want to talk about being inspired by somebody who's moving beyond themselves to help you. That certainly inspired me to make sure that her efforts didn't go to waste. And so there was consuming the information, because, this is in 99, 98, 99, 2000. The internet really, was just getting started. We didn't have digitized books like we have today. Tools
We
weren't
barely had
nearly.
Amazon.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And so there was that, getting the information that I needed. The internet helped, but not everything had been digitized by then. Then I got into the workforce for a top consulting firm, and not every software application in the environment we were using worked seamlessly with my technology on my computer. So I had to learn how to write code so that I could engineer my own software without being able to see my computer screen, just to be able to effectively do my job. But the hard work that my dad and mom had taught me, the unwillingness to give up, the unwillingness to make excuses, the determination to see things through, the perseverance, the hard-headedness and or determination that we talked about earlier, helped me with what I needed, to continue to push through and learn how to write the code. And then I ended up getting so good at using computers and writing code that I later on ended up building software for one of Oracle's software products that they did not think could be done. They started referring business my way because they didn't think it could be done. And so it actually became a successful company that I started writing code to make software accessible for people who can't see. And so that included, writing code and doing different things for businesses and government agencies. But so there were loads of roadblocks, and I'm just talking tactical there. There were, social roadblocks. There was the stigma that gets attached to it. You walk into a conference room with a German Shepherd, people have questions, eyebrows go up. I may not be able to see those eyebrows go up, but I can definitely feel the energy shift. And so there's all kinds. I mean, the the roadblocks were everywhere.
Yeah.
They were
Did
absolutely
it,
everywhere.
and I'm sure they still exist in a lot of instances that you
1,000%.
encounter.
Yeah. They're
Yeah.
definitely not gone. They look a little bit different, and people are more open to being aware of them now. I think people are more aware of those roadblocks than they were back then, the lack of accessibility. But there's still, honestly, there's still a stigma. There's still like, I meet people and they just depends. I mean, I've heard everything, to be honest with you, Matt. I mean, people will come up and like, oh, you're blind. Oh, I'm sorry. Like, oh my gosh, it's so terrible. It's like, look, I'm not dead. I'm just blind. Like, it's fine. I've made peace with it. Like, you shouldn't be more upset about it than I am. I'm good with it. I'm
Sometimes people don't know what to say.
no, they don't. They don't. They just and they come from I think a good place when they say it, but they're so uncomfortable in that space that they're not sure what to say, which is a big part of what I do when I'm giving a keynote is I'll come out pretty quickly and put people at ease with some funny jokes, create some relatability, let them know that yeah, I've got a situation here that you could consider to be serious, but I don't take it so seriously that I can't joke about it. So I'll drop some blind jokes, let them know that this is not a bless your heart kind of keynote presentation. I'm not asking for sympathy. I'm not here to stroke heartstrings or any of that. I'm here to tell you a story and challenge you to be a better version of yourself.
Yeah. Do you, this might sound wrong, and I don't mean it wrong, just like you just said.
Mhm.
Do you see losing your sight as something that maybe even propelled you in different ways that maybe if you hadn't, you wouldn't have done?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I'm a better person because of my blindness and not in spite of it. I think I would be less successful today if I could still see. And that's because for me, going blind forced me to improve lots of different aspects of my life. I had to have a better perspective. I had to have more focus, more effort, and more determination. I had to work harder. I had to be disciplined. I had to really figure out how to cultivate what I call blind ambition. The ability to know where I want to go and summon the inner strength, perseverance, and determination to find my path there. Certainly, if life would have been as easy as it was before, because grades came easy for me, athletic achievements came easy for me, and I kind of got lazy. To be honest with you, things came so easily that I kind of got lazy. And after I went blind, lazy really wasn't an option anymore. I had to work
Right.
extra
Well,
hard
it
just to do the
was.
mundane.
I mean, technically, it could have been. You could have stayed in a state that wasn't as aggressively pushing forward and meeting goals and doing things that brought you joy that you didn't even know were going to bring you joy. You could have done that,
That's fair. Yeah.
and I think that in itself is, whether or not you have sight or not. I mean, I feel like that's super inspiring and probably why your speaking gigs and things like that resonate with people, because you don't have to have a loss of sight to be inspired by your resilience and the things that you go after. Because I talk to people all the time before some life shift moment that happens in their lives. They were just kind of like you just described, like kind of just going along
Yep.
and being a little lazy. And,
Yep.
like honestly, in my life, a lot of like after my mom died, I just like took over these perfectionism tendencies because I was afraid that if I wasn't perfect at things, then my dad would leave because my mom left in my small brain, right? She died,
Mhm.
so she was gone. So I was afraid my dad was going to do the same. And what happened was because
Mhm.
I became this perfectionist, grades came easier. All these things came easier. And then I was like, well, I don't have to do the hard things anymore. I can just do the thing that looks hard, but is a little bit easy. So I was kind of going down that same
Mhm.
route. And it wasn't until I went to therapy and kind of broke through the grief bubble that I was in
Yeah.
until I was like, okay, now I can do the things that I want to do. I can achieve the things that I want to do. And so it's like I had to have this moment of a perspective shift, I guess, if you will,
Yeah.
kind of like yours when you
Yeah.
went to get your dog, until I started like getting out of that lazy mode. So I can see how your story would be different, maybe, but also like how inspiring it could be to anyone that you do the things that you do.
What it sounds like, if I'm hearing you right, a lot of it could have been that you were maybe not taking as many risks.
Oh, of course not.
Be,
Because if I would have failed,
yeah, your brain. I mean, you wanted to
mhm,
be perfect. You wanted to fulfill or achieve every goal, and
exactly.
it's really hard. to grow, to reach your full potential if you're scared of failing and you you cracking that bubble that you talked about, the grief bubble, I'm sure unlocked a lot of ceiling for you in terms of what you were willing to experiment with and in pursuit of what was, really deep inside you, what you wanted to achieve deeply inside of you, as opposed to just cashing in on the things that you knew that you could win pretty easily.
100%. 100%. And it was, and I don't think I could have got there any sooner because of how I experienced the loss such an early age. It kind of was like embedded.
Yeah,
And so it just took that journey to go on. And so, I think we all have these like weird parallels, even though none of our lives are the same. It's just kind of like we're human, I guess. And so we can be inspired by the turn of a switch. Like had you not walked in to get your guide dog at that time and or had you walked in and there was no one there, it was just getting your dog, maybe you wouldn't have had the same experience, right?
I
So it's
wouldn't
like,
have. My life would be
right.
totally different. It would be totally different. I could have easily still been the poor me victim who showed up there at 23 years old. But instead, I left just completely blown away with the living courage that these people exuded. It was a really powerful moment for me.
That perspective shift is just so powerful when we have it, when we're lucky enough to get to experience that, and then what we can do with it after. It's just really powerful. And your own example, I mean, your life changed
Yeah,
from that
absolutely.
one shift.
And I think, if I look at kind of how my life has unfolded, I think we talked about your your tendency to want to be perfect and not take chances. I think mine has sort of been the opposite. And I think it's because of how I grew up. I think, growing up and going blind is, when you're bumping into things and you don't know what you can't see, you're learning your limitations. It's very uncomfortable. It's physically uncomfortable, it's socially uncomfortable, it's emotionally uncomfortable, and then you go blind, and then you get a guide dog and it's leading you around, and you're appreciative and grateful, but the first time you step inside a classroom or a boardroom or a job interview with a German shepherd, that's uncomfortable. The first time you board a plane, you realize, wait, I got to move to a new city, learn the layout of Atlanta. I'm from Knoxville. I don't have any friends here. I don't know how I'm going to get my groceries. I can't phone it in. There's no delivery service. How am I going to get my groceries? How am I going to do my laundry? I can't drive. I only have one free hand to carry my stuff because I've got a German shepherd leading me around. I've got to learn how to write code to engineer software. I've got to make it to downtown Atlanta on the bus and train system. I can't see. How am I going to learn that? I got to travel all across the country to go to client sites to do project work. I've got to learn new hotels, new airports. All these things were uncomfortable. They were incredibly uncomfortable. And so I believe that my life really has been an experiment of living outside my comfort zone. And the more that I lived in that space, the more my comfort zone began to expand. And so, then next thing you know, I'm traveling to Asia or Europe or South America with just me and my guide dog, not being able to see and it just being kind of normal and still getting up at 5 a.m. to go get my morning workout in. And all that sort of led to the point to where I decided at 38 years old, I wanted to do something maybe a little unconventional for a totally blind person, learn how to downhill ski. And so now I ski black and sometimes even double black diamonds. And
Wow.
at 45, almost 46 years old, I decided I'm going to start Brazilian jiu-jitsu because that's what totally blind guys do is they figure out if they can defend themselves
Naturally.
against chokehold and arm bars, right?
Right.
When they're competing in tournaments. And so I think what has happened in my life is it's been such an experiment of living outside of my comfort zone. I've started to crave that discomfort. And I find that through skiing and I find that through jujitsu and I find that through starting, whether it's a new skill like speaking or coaching or being an author, all these things. But that's where growth happens. That's where innovation happens. That's where you're able to crack into new dimensions of yourself that you didn't even know were there. And so this blindness has been, such a big challenge for me. But to your question earlier, has it benefited me in some way? And circling back to this tendency of wanting to be a perfectionist, it's like, I think because everything has been so difficult and uncomfortable for me, it's made me very comfortable in being uncomfortable, which has made it easier for me to experiment, to find new and better ways of doing things, to put myself out there and take a little more risk. And as a result of that, I've seen myself evolve in ways that I could have never imagined. When I went blind back in my 20s, I could have never imagined that I'd be where I'm at today doing all the things that I'm doing. But I think ironically and paradoxically, it's because of the hardship that I've gone through, all of the adversity and all of the issues that I faced as a result of my blindness.
Yeah. I mean, it seems like it because you had to live in uncomfortable situations and you one by one accomplished each of them or made it through or did it really well or whatever that may be, it also must build your confidence that whenever a roadblock comes to you, you don't necessarily shy away from it because, hey, you've conquered so many before. So I can imagine how it just becomes almost like this, like you said, like a craving of, all right, what's next? What else can I do
It is.
in some way? I mean, downhill skiing, that seems to be something that is probably not too common for people with a lack of sight,
Yeah,
right?
I mean, you find a lot
Or
of
is it?
people. It's more common than you would think. I'd say it's more common than you would think. The
I've
number
never
of
done a
people who
black.
ski the way that I ski on the terrain that I ski, probably not as
Yeah.
common because we tend to cut it up pretty aggressively. We're not going down the bunny slope. We're letting it rip down the
Yeah.
mountain. The
Good for
scariest
you.
thing are the trees and the people. We got to make sure there aren't a lot of people out there. Don't want any
Right.
collisions and try to avoid trees. Trees aren't very favorable for a blind skier.
For
Obviously,
anyone, really.
yeah. But
Yeah.
but
I've tried I learned to ski when I was 35 and I can see and I will never go on a black diamond. So
well, there again, I think my blindness helps me because I can't see it. It doesn't scare me.
I guess I guess so. Yeah. I mean it's just like how did you like why did you want to do that? Just because?
Well, a friend contacted me, a friend of mine that I went to high school with. We're close buddies. We've known each other now for over 34 years. And he was out in Aspen. He had a business partner who had a ski in, ski out place in Aspen. And they had an adaptive program where they had people coming down the mountain who would otherwise be in wheelchairs on a mono ski. And he's like, hey, it'd be cool if they did that for people who can't see. And his friend said, yeah, they do. And so we started looking into it and they guide. And so he called me and said, hey, I got a crazy idea. You want to come ski? And I said, that does sound pretty crazy. Let me look into it. And then, I had to get a little comfortable with the idea. Just getting comfortable with the concept took some time, but I'm not, I wouldn't consider myself a conservative person. I'm a pretty bold person, but I looked at it and saw that it wasn't just like two guys trying to figure out how to do it. There was a system for it, and there were professionals who could help me learn how to do it in a safe way. And so we just started experimenting. I started getting comfortable with, going down the magic carpet or the bunny slope and getting comfortable putting on the bindings. And year after year, for the first 4 years I did 3 days of skiing. By the third or fourth year, I got to where I could do a black, got on some powder. Year four, had a spill, fell into a tree well, got a little scary there, but that was my first time skiing powder and it was on a pretty steep black. And now I've been skiing now for 10 years and we'll go 2, 3 weeks every year. And we have a blast, an absolute blast. And so now it's kind of second nature. The skiing is the terrain and all those things. I'm pretty comfortable on just about any terrain that we find ourselves in. The moguls can be a little tricky sometimes, depending on how I'm notified about the moguls. Sometimes I've been ejected a couple of times from a mogul run. My buddy didn't tell me because we're on a run that we've never done. And we hit moguls at 40 miles an hour, and sometimes that doesn't go so well. So you get ejected from your skis. But we,
I think that happens to those of us that can see. So I think that you're in good company with the moguls, especially like if you've been to Steamboat Springs, that's such all mogul bumps,
I haven't
the
been
whole
to
thing.
Steamboat. That's actually on my short list. We do a lot in Colorado because we have a place out there. We go to Keystone and Vale and Breck and Copper A Basin and there Beaver Creek's another good one
Snowmass,
out
you
there.
go there.
What's that?
Snowmass over in Aspen.
That's the place where I started, actually, with
Okay.
Snowmass. Yeah,
It's wide. It's very big.
I love Snowmass. Yeah, especially up there on Big Burn. Love up there on Big
Hmm.
Burn. A lot of my videos, you look at my ski videos, we shot a lot of those up there on Big Burn. Dallas Freeway, Wineskin, all those runs up there. Had an
Good
absolute
for
blast
you.
out there. Love it up there in Snowmass.
Yeah, and it's nice to get out in nature, I'm sure, for you
Oh,
to just like have that wind blowing, like it's just a really cool
it's the
feeling.
most free feeling I've ever had. My wife, I came back and she was a little, you can imagine my wife, like, hey, babe, I want to go skiing. I'm blind. She's like, have you lost your mind? And I'm like, well, I don't know that for sure.
We'll
But
find out.
but but what I do know, and I told her this when I came back, that is the freest that I've felt in 16 years since I went blind. And she knew at that point, no matter what she said, wasn't going to change my mind. And she just said, "Look, just do me a favor, text me or call me when you get off the mountain so that I know that you made it out okay." But it's one of those feelings that you just feel connected to God, nature. It's marvelous, right? And I can't even appreciate the visual beauty, but I can certainly appreciate the feeling, the sound, the smell, sensation, all the things. It's hard to describe for those who haven't had an opportunity, but it's almost a spiritual feeling being out there on
I
the
can
mountain.
imagine that. Would you say that skiing was maybe the hardest physical thing that you've done since going blind, or was the martial arts as hard or hard in a different way? Like,
I would say probably martial arts is probably harder. Yeah, because it's constant. I go tomorrow. I've been out of town. We talked a little bit before we hit record. My training philosophy is every day I'm in town, I train. When I travel, I can't usually train because I'm on the road. This is my 18th day today of training straight, and it's 2 hours every day plus whatever I do for weight training on top of that. And this isn't like
it's a shame you have no stamina. I'm sorry for that.
yeah, exactly. I didn't know my body would hold up. I actually came back from 3 weeks wondering will my body hold up because it's very hard on the body. It is.
Yeah, I would
It
imagine.
demands a lot, and it remarkably has held up pretty good. I was surprised to see that, but a lot of people, there are martial arts out there that don't demand quite as much. Jiu-jitsu, Brazilian jiu-jitsu, this is not a martial art that involves technique and no application in a live environment. Every day we apply the techniques that we learn in a live environment. So picture, if you will, a 2-hour session. You roll in, you warm up for 15 minutes, you learn technique for 30 minutes, you do some situational fighting from a certain position for another 20 minutes, and then you actually fight people in 5-minute rounds for another 30 minutes. So you're going pretty hard. We have a pretty competitive gym. We're not trying to maim one another. We're all friends. We're close, and so we err on the side of caution. And you always try to roll to the skill level of your opponent, your partner, but it asks a lot of you. It demands a lot of you. It is the most uncomfortable thing that I've done because you're constantly in bad situations. You're either being, somebody's trying to choke you, they're trying to armbar you, they're trying to wrist lock you, they're trying to knee bar you, all these things, and you are having to work out of some very difficult situations. And a lot of times some very strong and technical people. Some of the guys, they've been in there for 10, 15, 20 years. I mean, they're absolute killers. They're, large, athletic, nimble, technical, all the things that you don't want, or you do want, but you don't want on you. You want them by your side, defending yourself against whomever's coming after you. But we always say iron sharpens iron. And it's very, very difficult. It's very uncomfortable, which is why I think I love it so much, is because it is the epitome of getting comfortable with discomfort. Because let me tell you, I don't care how talented you think you are, how tough you think you are. The first time you step on the mat, the first 10 times you step on the mat and somebody gets a hold of you who knows what they're doing and they get you in a chokehold, man, it is terrifying. It feels like your head is being put inside of a vacuum cleaner bag. But a funny thing happens, right? The more you move towards that discomfort, the more you learn to settle into the terror, to lay down in the terror and get comfortable in the terror and submit to the terror. And you actually learn that instead of panicking and breathing heavily, you learn and condition yourself to bring your heart rate down, to slow your breathing, to calm yourself, to bring your heart rate down, and to calmly look for a way out. And ironically, oftentimes, these seemingly inescapable chokeholds that you find yourself in actually do have ways out if you can just stay calm enough to look for them. So it conditions you not only physically to actually fight for that amount of time and to do it day after day after day, but it conditions you mentally to look for the right technique. How do I get out of this? It conditions you emotionally to not panic. It conditions you spiritually to lay down and submit to the terror and get really comfortable and relaxed in the face of fear, and to realize that on the other side of your fear is growth. And if you don't get comfortable in the fear, you'll never get to realize the growth. So, from so many different levels, it requires so much of you. But I can't think of something that has made me grow more over the last several years than Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. And the other thing that it teaches you is it's sort of the antithesis of instant gratification that we find ourselves in. We live in a culture, a society that craves instant gratification, whether it's I want to be a 25-year-old CEO, or I want my overnight shipping from Amazon, or I want a YouTube video or Instagram video to go viral. Well, that doesn't exist on the mat. I don't care how talented you are or how nimble or strong you are. When you get on the mat and you're a beginner, you get humbled very quickly. And you realize that instant gratification does not exist in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Only through years of consistent practice, discipline, and effort will you get better. And after, 10, 15, 20 years, you may be great. But until then, you're probably going to be getting your dose of humility and humble pie from the people around you who have been doing it for that long.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting too, as you describe all the elements of jujitsu, which is really easy to say. It kind of mimics, or not mimics, but represents your life and the way that you tackle things in your own journey of like the challenges that others might see, and you're like, no way, I can just relax into it and know that I can accomplish it, and I know I can do this. And it just seems like this kind of parallel to the other things that you've done in your life, the way you described it, at least to me.
I've never thought of it that way, but I think you're onto something. Maybe that's
Yeah.
why I love it so much, because it does feel like such a metaphor for the way that I've
Hmm.
lived my life. That's fantastic. Yeah,
Yeah. Well, at least in the stories that you've told so far, it's like you talk about these chokeholds, you talk about these arm bars, you talk about these things that I would see in life as such, like in an experience of like, oh, that's going to be really hard to do. Let's see how I can get out of it, or get through it, or get
yeah.
to the next level, or whatever that may be. And so I can see why it's like a microcosm of like your life in like each session that you go to. It's like, let me experience all of it here in this 2-hour session
A
that I
great
do each day.
observation. I love that. I never thought of
So
it like that.
do you have, I mean, do you have something on your list that you haven't yet done, but you want to do, and you know it's going to be a big challenge for you, or could be a big challenge for you or other people?
Yeah, so there's some things I'm looking at doing a series that to be aired on PBS here in the upcoming the next several months. We're looking at shooting some footage at where there it's called Blind Adventures. We'll be doing some things
Mhm.
like climbing Kilimanjaro. I'm not too worried about that. It should be a
Okay.
pretty easy climb. Skydiving beneath the Arctic Circle. I'm not too worried about that. The one that gives me a little bit of pause is heli skiing, like jumping out of a helicopter on a pair of skis in
I
backcountry.
don't know why. That seems so easy.
Yeah, I know.
You'll be fine.
Why not? Right?
Yeah, no, I know that's never going to be on my list, and it's just I'm okay with that. But good for you.
Yeah, I'm not worried about it, but I do have some pause about it. I'll have to really think through, all right, what terrain are we being dropped off in? What do the avalanche charges look like around that area? From what elevation will we drop in from the chopper? Like how far down do I have to jump before hitting the snow? All those things. Like it'll take me
Smart choices.
yeah,
I feel like,
little
yeah, you
details
get
that kind of matter.
yeah. It's not like and it's not like we're trying to, I don't think you come across that like you would take every risk that ever existed.
No.
But you might take some calculated
I
risk.
will.
You might take some things that are challenging to you, but like you're not going to do things that you know are just 100% unsafe for you.
No, I have a family. I have, wife and 2
Right.
kids. I wanna come home to them, but I also
Yeah.
don't wanna live my life based on fear decision making. I will not live my life based on fear decision making. The one thing that I know is I'm going to die. We are all going to die. The question is, are we going to live? And I choose to live. I will choose to live my life, and I'll take precautions, and I will try to not be careless. I will do my absolute best, but I also won't live timidly or in fear because something bad might happen. Something bad might
Right.
happen whether or not
But that could
I
happen anyway.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so
That could happen walking to the mailbox.
exactly. Or yeah, exactly. Just sitting here at my house, I can have a heart attack and keel over, and
Fair.
I don't want to look back
Don't
on
do
my
that.
life and have regrets. The thing that I always
Hmm.
look at when I'm thinking through these decisions, whether it's whether or not I want to go heli skiing or skydiving, or do I want to move to Atlanta to take my first job with a technology consulting company? I
Right.
call it the future you exercise. And so fast forwarding into the golden years, if we're also fortunate to make it there, when you look back on your life, what can future you live with? Can future you live with trying and failing in pursuit of a
Hmm.
goal or never knowing whether or not it could have been possible? And so
Right.
for me, in the long arc of life, I am more fearful of not knowing. I'm more fearful of having the regrets than I am of failing. And so I
Right.
try to let that guide my decision making when it comes down to these sorts of things. But certainly, I try to be prudent. Like I wouldn't consider myself risk averse, but I do want to come home, but I also want to live while I'm here because I know that our time is short and the clock is ticking.
Yeah. I'm curious, and this is totally like off on a tangent, but I'm curious what having a guide dog has taught you, or has it taught you
Oh
anything?
yeah.
Like the dog itself, or having a dog, or multiple dogs, or whatever it may be.
Well, the first thing it teaches you is patience. When you
Mm.
go blind and you rely on a dog to guide you around, and patience never was my virtue, which is probably how I ended up going blind. I needed some more patience in my life. And so now, I have to be more patient because the dog is doing the work. The other thing that it really instills in you is all of us need to make work fun. And my dog does the work that he does because of the love and the affection, but also because the work is fun. If the work stops being fun, the dog won't want to do it. If I'm stressed out, that comes through to the dog. That energy is transferred through the harness to the dog. And so if I'm late or if I'm, lost in an airport or if I'm whatever is going on with me and my situation, if I let any anxiety transfer from me to the dog, meaning if I have anxiety about it, it will transfer. And if it transfers to the dog, then we've got a like double trouble because now the dog is feeling the anxiety. So it helps me kind of settle into the adventure of getting around. And I realize, yeah, I take these trips to overseas, whether I'm going to Singapore, Dubai, or wherever, and I can't see, and I just leave the house, and I know that, you know what, I'm probably going to get lost once or twice, or maybe even a dozen times today. I don't know. I can't control any of that, but what I can control is whether or not I let it affect me, and I just choose to see it more as an adventure, as a challenge, not as this illusion that I'm going to do it flawlessly, because that's just not going to happen. And it helps me manage my own temperament, but also, and importantly, the temperament of my guide, Major in this case, and make sure that, he's comfortable and relaxed and we're having fun together. And we may get turned around, but we'll make it there. Maybe a little late, maybe not, but at least we'll be safe and in one piece.
Right. So it's like a symbiotic relationship that is like super beneficial in more ways than just being guided or
Absolutely.
having a guide.
Absolutely.
Yeah. That's so interesting. I've never asked someone that. So thank you for answering that. I think it was kind of assumed, but also I think there are some people that might look at a guide dog as more of a tool and less of a relationship, and less of a like kind of we're attached and we have to get through this together kind of feeling.
Yeah, yeah, maybe, yeah, and if they do, I mean, it's like whether you're leading a team. If you're seeing your team like that, probably not going to get the best results, right? I mean, leaders, great leaders, know how to connect with people on an emotional level, and they know that people are driven to to go above and beyond. They're inspired to give that discretionary effort based on the relationship. And that's where it starts, whether it's with people or with dogs. And so my question is, how do you inspire discretionary effort from the people around you? And the only way I know to do that is through empathy, through compassion, through love, and through the bond that you create.
Yeah. Which sounds like you really fell into as these different moments in your life kind of smacked you in the face, like the perspective change when you got your guide dog, or when you heard from people after your speech at Harvard, or when you went for the training for the leadership, like all these little moments kind of cracked you open to be really exposed to just having this empathy and being able to listen and care and genuinely care, and
Yeah.
not just like on a surface level care, but like really understand how people might feel.
It's funny how life works, isn't it? Um, I never
Yeah,
really
I'm learning that.
anticipated that. I've never really anticipated that. I was at a senior leadership offsite years ago. It was back in 2011 or 2012. And I remember sitting there where the company was going through a big transformation, and I was a senior leader at the company. And I remember having this epiphany at the moment that I had always looked at people's ability to deal with change through my own lens. And I was sitting there wondering, gosh, I mean, we had some changes to benefits and we had to do some things that on the surface seemed a little draconian, and that was hard. But come on, people. I mean, it's not the end of the world. I was looking at how they should perceive these things based on my own basket of life experiences, which is incredibly unfair. It's an incredibly unfair thing to do. And so that was probably, excuse me, the first big epiphany on that journey that I had of having more empathy of holy smokes. I'm holding everybody else accountable for using my own measuring stick for resilience. And that's completely unfair. I've been through so much more than the average person to expect them to be able to see it as flexibly as I do. It's just an unfair thing. And so that was a big aha moment that sort of began this cracking open of that empathy. And certainly I've come a long, long way since that time 12, 13 years ago.
Well, even with that, like thinking back to, the teenage version of you as you knew things were getting a little bit closer, like knowing who you are now and all the cool things that you do for yourself, with yourself, and for other people. Like, what would you say to that teenage version of you?
Um, what would I say to the teenage version of me? I'd probably say just pause, take a breath. Things are going to end up a whole lot better than you could ever imagine at that point. And that's just, I mean, when I was going blind, before I went blind, if you had told me that I'd be doing what I'm doing today and have the level of and not even just traditional success, but like meaningful work, contributions to helping other people, and being able to do it in a way that is consistent with my values and reuses and repurposes a lot of what I've been through. I kind of feel like I got the cheat code to life, to be honest with you. Kind of feels unfair that I get paid to do what I do, but it feels really great doing well by helping others do well for themselves. It's just phenomenal.
Right. And like you said, that version of you probably would be like, what are you talking about? Like I can't even imagine that. Or maybe not. Maybe you knew because you were pushing through things. But
I don't think that version of me had a clue that this existed.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's like you said, life is it's what a journey, and the things that we learn along it. It's just very, very interesting to hear your story, and very inspiring in a way that is like, just go for it. Because like you said, when you're in your golden years and you're looking back, are you going to be like, damn, I wish I would have done that, or I wish I would have tried,
Yeah.
or I wish I would have, stepped into that because I think I would have liked it, whatever that may be. So thank you for just sharing that message, whether that was intentional or not. Thank you for
Yeah.
sharing your story in
It's
that way.
that was not intentional, but that's what drives me because I realize the clock's ticking and we don't get do-overs. So,
Yeah.
you know,
Well, if people want to like learn more about you, like what's the best way to get in your orbit, or is it your website? Is it finding your book? Like how should we find you?
yeah, if they go to chadefoster.com/life shift, got a welcome page for everybody here. We've got some giveaways that they can access, but that takes you to my website. From there, you'll see my social media handles. You'll have, links for the book, all kinds of videos there, articles that I've written, press pages, all kinds of different things. That's the best way to find where I'm at. Obviously, the book's on Amazon and wherever fine books are sold, in any format you can hope for: hardcover, Audible, Kindle, all the things. But all those links, if they go to that website, again, it's chadefoster.com/life shift.
Awesome. We'll put that in the show notes. We'll put some of the other your social media in the show notes as well so that they can connect with you. You know, my ask for people listening is if something that Chad said today resonates with you, reach out to Chad, or if you know someone in your life that just needs to hear this message and whatever stuck out with you, please share this episode with them. I would be so ever grateful. And I just want to thank you again, Chad, for just being willing to have this conversation and not knowing where it was going to go and allowing that to happen.
Absolutely. I enjoyed it. Thanks so much.
Thank you. If you are listening and you enjoy what you hear, please leave a review and a rating and all the stuff that I never asked for. That would be wonderful. And until next week, I will be back. Well, I don't know what I meant to say there. I meant to say I will be back next week with a brand new episode. Thanks again, Chad.
Thank you.
For more information, please visit www.thelifeshiftpodcast.com.